Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. It's so wonderful to be with you tonight. Let's begin by setting our motivation, and let's begin by thinking about our ultimate source of protection, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Let's think about putting the merit field in the space in front of us. Let's think about all the holy enlightened beings that serve as our guides, that serve to help us, to show us exactly what we can do in order to achieve all of the aims that we have. Let's think about these beings that we want to connect with in all of our lives, that will be our guides, that will show us everything that we need to know about the grounds and the paths and ethical behavior and the nature of reality we find in the profound view lineage. So imagine that all of the holy enlightened beings that you feel connected to begin to fill in the space in front of you, giving you a source of protection, a source of strength that will allow you to then set your motivation at the highest level you possibly can. And that's the level of bodhicitta, this ultimate level of caring for others that you'll be able to achieve when you become a Buddha. So we'll look to these beings to be able to, in the future, connect with us and show us exactly what we need to know in order to achieve the realizations that they've been able to achieve. So we see Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of us, looking into our eyes with immense loving kindness and compassion. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Chen Rezig in person, right here in our world, breathing the same air that we breathe, giving the teachings of the Nalanda tradition that are such medicine for so many sentient beings. Lord Chen Rezig is here in the space in front of you, as he is in the world, pervading all directions. Imagine all of your holy lamas you've connected to, lamas like Khenser Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, many of our root lama, Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, Dema Loche Rinpoche, Khenser Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu Rinpoche, Umsala Geshe Aga Rinpoche, Jeffrey Hopkins Rinpoche, all beings that you consider enlightened beings who have guided you in your life, who you've maybe looked into the eyes of and know what it's like to see a being who's evolved so much, see a being who's like an ultimate role model that we can look to see exactly what we can become. Imagine those kinds of beings that you may have had experience with are looking into your eyes. If you've ever been able to look into the eyes of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and seen that immense love just coming at you that you've never felt before, or looked into the eyes of your direct Lama and felt that. Feel this when you invoke the merit field, the refuge field. Feel that you're connecting with beings as if they're right there in the space in front of you with the same kind of motivations that you've seen these beings interact with you with in the past. Imagining the extensive deeds lineage and the profound view lineage and the lineage of blessings, all of these things that we're going to need to know are contained within the books that trickle down through all of these lineages, from Buddha Shakyamuni through the extensive deeds and profound view lineage and the lineage of blessings and the old Kadampa lineages and all the lineages of the Tibetan traditions of the Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, and Galupa. Imagine that all of those holy beings are in the space in front of you, ready to connect with you in all of your lives, to be able to share the Dharma with you, to be able to make your mind know that this is the most important material in the universe. If I could learn how to develop renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, as well as the foundation of a concentration that could keep my mind on something singly, that concentration of calm abiding, if I can generate these realizations, then I'll be able to achieve the realizations that these beings have achieved. And contained within all of these scriptures of these beings, we find all of the teachings. So it's so important that we in our minds connect with these beings, connect with them in all of our lives, so that we then have the medicine over and over and over again to take. Because if we don't connect with our liberation in this lifetime, if we're unable to achieve that goal of Buddhahood in this lifetime, we want to have flawless guides in our future lives. We want to connect with the exact material that we need in order to get as quickly as we can to our desired state of freedom from suffering and the ultimate amount of happiness that we can have. And we can all have this ultimate happiness that the Buddha has, because we have the Buddha nature. We have a mind that can mature. We have a mind that's empty of inherent existence, isn't stuck in a certain pattern. It's only dependently originating experiences based on cause and effect. And what we need to do is create the causes within our mind stream for the dependent origination of the experience that the Buddha has to take place within our experience, within our clear and knowing mind. Our clear and knowing mind can clearly know enlightenment and omniscience. And we have to create the causes and conditions in order for that state to be achieved, in order for us to realize, have that state of separation from the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. So we have to engage in causes that will allow for that actual separation to take place. And those causes, what we need to do, are contained within these teachings. So it's so important for us to know that our minds have never in the past really had this kind of affinity for things. And this is why we're still in cyclic existence. But the more affinity for the truth that we can create, then the more likely we are to exit cyclic existence and then exit the obstructions to omniscience as well, and become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So these are the beings that we rely upon. So think about all of these holy beings, all of the 4 classes of Tantra beings, the 35 Buddhas, the protector deities. Imagine that all of the beings are in the space in front of you that serve as your protection. For protection from what? Protection from fear. Protection from fear of what? Fear of cyclic existence, fear of the 8 sufferings, fear of the 6 sufferings, fear of the 3 types of suffering, fear of your inability to be the most reliable guide in the universe, fearing that state of unreliability. All of these things the Buddha has come to the world to show us how to cure. How to get rid of the sickness, the 2 kinds of sickness that are our biggest enemies, the sickness of self-grasping ignorance and the sickness of the self-cherishing attitude. And they won't just magically go away. These are things that we have to, hear about the truth first, and then analyze with our mind. And then once we discover that upon our analysis of what the Buddha has taught, what the Buddha has taught is accurate, then we can actually meditate upon it and have realizations into that subject matter. And it has to go in that fashion of learning and then analysis and then actual meditation. It won't come out of nowhere. It won't come without a lot of effort. Nothing incredible comes without a lot of effort. You've never in your life been able to achieve magnificence with a little tiny, tiny bit of effort. If you want to get a PhD, you need an incredible amount of effort. Imagine if you want to become omniscient, the amount of effort that you're going to need. But we know because of cause and effect, we can become omniscient because our mind can mature to its most highest potential based on creating the causes and conditions for that ripening of its highest potential. And we will need this information to rely upon informations on the grounds and paths and the Vinaya and the final view found in the profound view lineage, the final view of Nagarjuna, and Arya Deva and Buddha Palita and Shanti Deva and Chandrakirti. But we need to be able to see the entire roadmap of view and roadmap of pathways that allow us to get to that final conclusion in terms of the view, and allow us to know exactly what the ripening paths are that will be necessary for us to traverse in order to, combined with the view, achieve no more learning, achieve a state of perfection. So these are the beings we rely upon. Imagine that our source of refuge is here now in the space in front of us. Feel the warmth, feel the embrace of a being who cares about you more than any being has ever cared about you and that you've ever known of. And this is the kind of being that you will become by relying upon the same causes that the Buddha relied upon to become this kind of being that could love you more than anyone in the universe has the ability to love you. So imagine that those kind of beings fill the space in front of you and they don't leave. They're just here to stay with us. Now, imagine that we invite all sentient beings to be our guest, to just have this magnificent experience that we're having. We're going to share with them the merit field experience that we're having. We've invoked this merit field as a witness to our practice, as a witness to be here to see that today we're doing something about our self-grasping ignorance. Today, we're doing something about our self-cherishing attitude. And this is all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas have ever wanted from us. All they've ever wanted from us is for us to take the reins and actually engage in the practices they've passed down to be able to realize the things that they've realized in the same ways that they realized them. So this is what's so magnificent about this. And we're sharing this now with all sentient beings. Normally, we don't share things. Normally, we keep keep wonderful things to ourselves. We sometimes lock them in a safe or put alarms on them. But here we have the most magnificent gift in the universe that's ever been given to us. And it was given so freely to me by my root Lama, Namgyal Khentsur Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Geshe Dorje Damdul Rinpoche, and Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche. All these beings were so kind and so generous with the Dharma. So I feel so fortunate to be able to share this with you today. And now imagine that you, and I'm going to imagine as well, are able to share this teaching. You're leading all sentient beings here to be your guests, to be able to hear this, and to be able to also see the magnificent merit field in the space in front of them. So as you invite all sentient beings here to be your guest, imagine that they're going, wow, they're just amazed by the magnificence of the merit field in the space in front of them. And maybe some of these sentient beings have never been able to feel that kind of love in their entire life. Sometimes, if you think about the billions of people on the earth and how many of them have been able to, be near His Holiness the Dalai Lama or be near someone like Khentsur Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, how many beings in the universe, right now in this life have been able to really look into the eyes of someone who cared about them in that kind of way that would put your needs before their needs at any moment. The closest maybe you've come is seeing when a child is born, the parents have this feeling of being willing and to put the child's needs before their own, and this immense love kind of takes place. There's something that's similar to that, but there's also an attachment in there. And when you see the love that's going on when we relate to our teachers, you'll see that it's a different kind of love. It's a love that cares for you and puts your needs before their own, but there's not this attachment that we would normally have that's a disturbed state of mind that exaggerates the object. So there's an exaggeration of you as a little baby the parents are making that is making them attached to you whilst wanting you to have happiness and be free from suffering and being willing to put your needs before their own. But there's also a state of mind that's disturbed where there's an exaggeration of the object that's taking place that then causes suffering around that relationship with the child when the child's sick and so forth, and then can disturb one's real ability to have that kind of pure love. So we're really fortunate. Any of us who've been able to have the experience of a Lama in our lives are really, really fortunate to be able to have felt that and to be able to know what that's like. So imagine that sentient beings who are coming here now that we're calling are having maybe this experience for the first time, and they have the awe, they have the wow, and they're just so surprised that there's beings like this that can lead them. And imagine that as they come here, they're so just mesmerized and so blown away by the love in the eyes of these beings that they begin to listen intently. And it's so important that when we attend a teaching that we listen intently, we listen very well, because we need to hear the information correctly. We need to make sure that the information that we take in is all of the accurate information, so that then when we start to cut and rub it, as the Buddha said, check it, make sure it's accurate, make sure it makes sense, discover whether it's truth for us or not. When we start to cut and check it, we need to make sure that we're checking something that was actually told to us. And if we're not listening very closely, or if we're half listening, or coming in with a lot of crowded ideas that aren't allowing us to listen, then we're not going to have the appropriate information to analyze. And then if we don't have the appropriate information to analyze, we won't know whether or not what Buddha said is accurate, We won't know whether or not this is discoverable because we won't have the information that's necessary to discover in our analysis that it makes sense. And then we won't be able to take that into a meditative state because we won't have the correct information. We might even actually fool ourselves into thinking that we have the correct information in our analysis and can make a conclusion that's wrong based on the half right information we've received, make a wrong conclusion through analysis, and then carry that into our meditation. And we won't necessarily really have results. And you'll see folks for years, they engage in practices that are here and there, and they don't really have any kind of integrated path. And it doesn't have the results that they're looking for. And sometimes they just don't try anymore. And it's really important to create it in a way that will produce the ripening results, and to be realistic with your practice, and to make sure that you're starting from a place that's really an accurate place to start from, and not kind of wishing you were at a higher place and just starting there even though you're not. So the Lam Rim is such an incredible guide for us to be able to see where we're really at, and then use the mirror of the Dharma to kind of put us in our place and put us on our cushion to be at the stage in the path where we really accurately can have realizations. And realizations not meaning seeing emptiness, meaning having a little less enough attachment to be able to be more engaged in our practice, to have a little bit less aversion, to make us not as glued to certain things that just kind of keep us up at night. So imagine sharing this kind of thing with all sentient beings. So we're going to do it the way that we always do. Imagine all sentient beings are being completely just inspired by the merit field, and we're bringing them here, beginning with those closest to you, and then moving on to beings that maybe are strangers, and then moving on to beings that you feel maybe you have a difficulty with. And make sure that you leave no beings aside. Kamala Shila in the stages of meditation is very clear that we need to make sure we use real beings, and we need to make sure that we, as we, start to think about sentient beings and meditate upon them in our various meditations of bodhicitta, 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment and or equalizing and exchanging self with others, that we're using these actual beings that we have relations with to be able to see what our mind does, to be able to see if we have an equal willingness to benefit all of these different types of beings, or if our mind moves more towards one or another, or has a difficulty inviting certain beings. And when we have this difficulty or this kind of strain on our mind that doesn't allow us to maybe invite certain beings who we find difficulty with, even if they're on the television, or people who have just differing opinions than we have, this is the greatest gift that we've ever had, because we never said to ourselves before that having a problem with someone we dislike is a problem. We've thought that there were people who were good and people that were bad, and those people that are really bad are just bad people. And here we find out that no one with bias has ever become a Buddha. No one with any bias in their mind has ever become a bodhisattva. So when you start to see this, you start to realize that your mind isn't operating in a way that a bodhisattva mind works. You start to see that you have to undo the unbodhisattva-ness of your mind if you want to become a bodhisattva. So these gifts that we receive from the teachings, that there's so many different meditations that you can do, but we start with this one, and it's something good that you can start with, that when you do any kind of virtue, you want to invite all sentient beings in on that. It allows you to make that virtue as expansive as the number of sentient beings that you invite there to share that virtue with you, because you're eventually going to be leading all sentient beings in virtue. So the more you engage in practices like this, the more you're accumulating merit, but you're also looking at your mind to see what your mind's reaction is like with the various types of beings that you're inviting. So I think it's an incredible gift to be able to see that when I want to invite someone that I care so much about, but then when I move on to someone that's maybe just someone I've seen in passing a few times, but I can visualize them, I would call a stranger. If I'm as apt to just, I've got to kind of search them out, and if there was a house fire, who would I feel an urgency to take one person out more than the other person out? That person I visualized as a stranger, do I equally want to get them out, or am I going first to the person? And I know you have to make a choice. There's got to be a first, but it's all about creating these scenarios in our meditation to check our mind. Create in the bodhicitta, we can emptiness, we have to be very rigid. We have to be checking with making sure that we're arriving at a non-affirming negative and making sure that we're using really specific formulas to make sure that our thinking isn't going astray. But bodhicitta is something that's like a free, once you have kind of the framework around what you're trying to do, abandon self-cherishing attitude and get an attitude that cherishes others with loving kindness and compassion there. Once you find out that that's your goal and your mission, and you start to see the step work within these practices, and you start to see the oral traditions kind of hints at how you would do this, these are precious gifts that I, just wanted to share with you tonight and have shared with you in the past. But if it can help you in your practice, I really rejoice. So see how your mind reacts to that difficult person versus your closest loved one. And see if you are equally willing to benefit all of these types of beings. And if you feel this kind of rub that's a difficult rub, recognize the fact that you're going to have difficulty even moving to this is a pre-step equanimity when we're talking about an equal willingness to help. And of course, when we're bringing sentient beings here, we're incorporating love and compassion. Those are all latter steps that you require this idea of equanimity as a pre-step when we're looking at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And if we're looking at it in terms of equalizing, exchanging self with others, the first thing we have to do is come up with the idea that all sentient beings are equally important. We're a sentient being. Everyone's as equally important as us. So for me to say someone who's difficult is as equally important as the person that I love more than anyone in the world, that's the step you have to do. Kind of when you look at both practices, you have to come to a conclusion like this. That's a heavy, heavy thing to be able to conclude. We think these ideas of love and compassion are so simple, but they aren't really, really the love and compassion that the Buddha is talking about. They're just more bias, or they're kind of pity, things like this. But they aren't the kind of thing that the Buddha's really talking about when the Buddha's talking about invoking this mind of non-bias, this kindness that the Buddha's talking about, this idea that when someone's, acting in a way that's absolutely disgusting, they're just under the influence of these horrible afflictions, and you should have compassion for them because they're under control. And this is a heavy place to be able to get to in your mind, to be able to see that everyone has had these relationships with you. So everyone is equally important and equally someone that you should be willing to benefit based on what you conclude in these meditations before you even get to cherishing others is bad, cherishing yourself is bad, cherishing others is good, and love and compassion, and these special exchanges that take place, and the great kindness and altruism and so forth. It's really important to get this foundation down of equanimity and this non-biased idea. And the way we check it is by doing things like this. So I know I've been harping on this for weeks and weeks, but I think it's something that's harp-onable. I think it's something that's overlooked quite a bit. And I think that we talk about love and compassion, and I think it's really easy to start to do the 7-point cause and effect. All sentient beings are our mothers, brothers, sisters, uncles, whatever person we find the closest to us. In this particular one, it's all sentient beings are our mothers. So when we get there, that's a place that it's easy for us to just kind of play with that and not really work it the way the Lam Rim says, to go with those who, are closest to you, then neutrals, then difficult people, and really work with real beings that exist If you haven't worked out this first precept of equanimity, as soon as you get to this, stranger and more difficult person, it's really not going to make sense that you would want to see them as your mother is now, because they are your mother. Seeing the continuum as an entity of I, continuum as the entity that the I's been designated on over and over and over again. And you see that in your previous life, who did you say, when they said your name, you'd say, that's me. I. So we just have to start to think a little bit differently. And the way we start to think differently is by doing exercises like this and to see what our reactions are, to see if we have attachment where we're exaggerating things to be more pleasant than they are. We have aversion where we're exaggerating things and thinking that they're more disgusting than they ever could be. There's this, and we push away things we feel aversion or yuckiness towards, and we run at things that we're attached to. And we have head-on collisions and inabilities to get with the things that we want, and then that hurts. And then we have the inability to get the things away from us that we want to get away from us, and that pushing hurts so much when it won't move out of our way. So we see that we want to try to get to a place where this isn't occurring in our mind, because in relation to other beings, when we have these states of minds where there's this exaggeration in terms of attachment that makes us us kind of move towards things, and the exaggeration that of aversion that makes us push away things, when we have a kind of a pull and a push, there's not a way to equally help everyone. There's not a way to get to a place where we have this kind of attraction, this love through the force of attraction that occurs once we get to the fourth step of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. If we don't start with this kind of foundational ground level that allows us to grow the idea that all sentient beings are our mother from. So again, we're inviting all sentient beings here to be our guests, to be able to experience this, to witness the refuge field and the space in front of us, imagining they're inspired and amazed to be able to see beings that care about them so much, beings that look into their eyes in a way with loving kindness that they've never seen before. So imagine you're inviting your friends, strangers, and then people that you feel difficulty with, and people you would consider enemies. Imagine you're inviting all of them here, and then other sentient beings. And of course, the animal realm we interact with and consider our friends too. So those beings you can, put into the category of friends as well. However you relate to sentient beings, the way you can make your mind bigger, however you can make your mind bigger, that's the most important thing to do, to connect with more and more sentient beings. The compassion aspect of the practice is so important. The compassion aspect of the practice reinforces our need to work on the emptiness and understanding of emptiness, and the understanding of emptiness reinforces the need to help sentient beings who don't have this, gift of understanding that has been passed down by the Buddha through the Nalanda tradition and the kind Tibetan masters, and really spoon-fed to us. So imagining all of those beings now, you're imagining hell, hungry ghost, animal, and then we just already went over humans, and then demigods and gods. And don't leave any sentient beings out, any beings that we consider that have a need to be able to evolve. So any beings who have afflictive obstructions or obstructions to omniscience, imagine that we're bringing them here to be able to witness this teaching and to be able to hear this. All of the beings in the desire realm gods and the form realm gods and the formless realm gods, imagine that we're inviting all of those beings here to be able to hear the stages of the path, to be able to recite these prayers, and to be able to move a little bit closer to the path of no more learning, to move a little bit closer to the place where the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience are no more, a place where one is the most reliable guide in the universe, with perfect love and compassion, perfect skillful means power, perfect wisdom. In the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, it talks about this incredible, excellent quality of caring for other, this excellent quality of understanding both the ultimate and conventional truth, reality and diversity, simultaneously, something that a Buddha is the only one that can do. So all sentient beings here are now your guests and are here to be able to listen to these teachings. And we know that we've invited them to a reliable place because the teachings are for the teachings for beings of three capacities, and that all of those teachings that Buddha gave that show us how to become Buddhas are contained within the teachings for beings of three capacities, the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity. We know that all of the teachings, all the way up to the completion stage of highest Yoga Tantra, are contained within these incredible teachings. In the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment and the great treatise on the stage of the tantric path to enlightenment are all contained within this 14 stanza poem that we've been looking at, the foundation of all good qualities, the source of all my good. And we're so fortunate to have all of these stages of the path to be able to listen to. And this is the reliable place that you're inviting all sentient beings to be able to witness these teachings, hear these teachings, and evolve their own minds and discover these truths themselves, because we know that that's all that the Buddha can do. That's all that anyone can do is teach sentient beings, and then sentient beings discover, like I will have to discover for myself what it is meant when the Buddha says that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge that we're about to read. I have to discover what that means by myself through the wisdom arisen from hearing, analysis, and meditation. So I have to study. I have to really look at a lot of information when it comes to the Madhyamaka Prasangika view and the object of negation and what the Buddha is talking about, what the problem with our perception the Buddha is talking about in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge is that leads us to all of our suffering. What self-grasping ignorance is exactly, and why from that I have inappropriate attention that leads to coarse afflictions, that lead to contaminated karmas, that leads to samsara, as Nagarjuna says in the Mulya Madhyamika Karika. Ceasing of karma and afflictions is nirvana. Karma and afflictions arise from conceptuality of inappropriate attention. Inappropriate, which in turn arises from elaborations of self-grasping ignorance. Elaborations cease into emptiness. So we see that from the self-grasping ignorance, we have the arising of inappropriate attention. And then from that, we have the arising of the kind of coarse afflictions. And from that, contaminated karmas, contaminated actions. And from that, we have the arisal of voila, cyclic existence. So to undo it, we back it out of that, and we see we've got to get rid of our contaminated karmas, which means we've got to get rid of our coarse afflictions, which means we have to get rid of our subtle afflictions, which are the inappropriate attention, and at the subtlest level, the self-grasping ignorance that sees things existing independently, independent of a designating consciousness. We don't think things exists through mere imputation. Certainly, we think that there's something from the side of the object. I'm looking at a chair. I'm always looking at a chair when I'm sitting here. We think that there's something from the side of the object, existing right in the object, that establishes it as this or that, established by way of its own character, meaning that it's just over there and out there, existing in the way that I'm experiencing it. And I'm not experiencing it in the way that it's its actual mode of existence, which is empty of inherent existence. So what does that mean? It's empty of having some existence from its own side, separate from mere imputation on independence upon a collection that's its basis of designation. And there's nothing from the side of the object that has any kind of establishment by its own character, or anything that I can find within its parts, or something that's intrinsically outside of its parts that is the designated object. So when I look to the basis of designation for the designated object and I subject it to ultimate analysis, I won't be able to find the mode of existence that I have always thought that things have had. I have always thought that things have existed from their own side. I think that I exist from my own side. I think that you exist from your own side. So there, when I think that I and you exist from our own sides, I have the kind of grasping at the self of person, which is half of the root of cyclic existence. And when I think that chairs and stuff like that and hands exist from their own side, I'm grasping at the self of phenomena. So then in the first moment, I say my hand, and then I say this hand is mine. And I have there grasping at the self of phenomena when I say that this hand inherently exists. And then I say that there is some sort of mind that inherently exists. And now, voila, I inherently exist, mine inherently exists, and my hand inherently exists. And I have this idea shaped within all of that that is the problem, the grasping at self of person and phenomena. So the Buddha said that the way that we undo this is by starting to subject things to ultimate analysis to try to come up to see if the way that we're experiencing things tallies with the reality, tallies with the actual realness. Is there something, the Buddha says that we're experiencing everything veiled. We're experiencing something in a deceptive way, that everything that we're experiencing from a sense perspective and from a mental perspective has an appearance or apprehension of inherent existence going on at all times. And there's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unless I'm lucky enough to be seeing emptiness directly, or a Buddha, if I'm not having those things going on, the appearance of the object of negation is always occurring. The appearance of inherent existence is always occurring. So of course I think things inherently exist. I could see it right with my eyes and then think it with my mind. And this self-grasping ignorance is an ignorance, and it's necessarily conceptual. So this apprehension where I say, oh, where in my mind I adhere to things in certain ways, this is a conceptuality that can be abandoned. And it's a mistaken conceptuality, so that it needs just a wisdom to kind of serve as its antidote. It needs kind of a discerning mind whose apprehension of the object tallies with reality. See, right now, I don't have a discerning a mind that the apprehension is tallying with reality. Why? Because I'm apprehending things to inherently exist. When I look at how things naturally appear to me, when I look at how I naturally appear to me, excuse me, I'll see that I feel that there's some concreteness about the me, about the my, about the I, about mine. But when I subject the I, me, mine to ultimate analysis, I'll find that when I subject it to the four essentials and I looked to see, okay, what's the object of negation? Okay, it's me, it's Jeff being able to stand on its own, having some kind of concrete inherent existence from my own side. Okay, well, I don't believe that there isn't such a thing. I think there's a Jeff that exists from his own side. Okay, so if there's a Jeff that exists somewhere, inherently, intrinsically, an objectively existent Jeff right within the object, right here, if there is such a thing, then it must be findable. So if it's findable, I know I'm going to be able to find it by looking within, Jeff's parts for some sort of intrinsically existent Jeff, or somewhere separate from Jeff's parts for an intrinsically existent Jeff. And when I start to do this, when I start to subject Jeff to the ultimate analysis, now again, I'm not looking for whether Jeff exists or not, because the object of negation isn't Jeff. The object of negation is an inherently existent Jeff. So whether Jeff exists or not, ultimate analysis has no business talking about. That's for conventional truth. That's for conventional analysis. Conventional analysis finds Jeffs and stuff, finds Jeffs and chairs. But ultimate analysis is only looking for the inherent existence of Jeff and chairs. So when I subject Jeff, in this case, to ultimate analysis to see if there's an inherently existent Jeff, And I look to see if there's an inherently existent Jeff within my parts. And I start to say, is Jeff my hand? Is Jeff my head? Is Jeff my skin? Is Jeff my cells, my bones, my blood? Is Jeff, my earth element? Is Jeff my water element? Is Jeff my fire element? Is Jeff air element? Is Jeff space element? Is Jeff consciousness? When I start to look to see, am I flesh and bones? Is Jeff flesh and bones? Okay, no, I don't find Jeff just in flesh and bones. Jeff's thinking. Is Jeff something that I can find just in kind of the blood that's pumping through my body? No, Jeff isn't blood. When I start to see, is Jeff the kind of energy, the heat, the warmth of Jeff's body? I start to say no. Is Jeff the air that's moving through my body? When I exhale, does Jeff leave my mouth? Okay, so I don't seem to find Jeff in this air. Is the space, all the space that's in, all throughout my body, is that Jeff? Well, that doesn't seem to, if I just had space, I wouldn't be able to see Jeff. Oh, is Jeff then consciousness? No, Jeff is established on this body that's a male. As soon as I remove the body and just move to consciousness, I can't seem to find Jeff. So then we stay in the experience where we just, through the 6 elements, through the earth, water, fire, wind, space, and consciousness, which is, if you would think about all of the possibilities, you just tried to find this Jeff within the parts, and you've landed in a place where there's a non-finding of Jeff within the parts, this basis of designation of the parts. But I said before we started here, there's an inherently existent Jeff. So now I have to see, is there an inherently existent Jeff that's separate from the parts? Now remove all of the parts. Jeff no longer makes sense whatsoever. There isn't something separate from the parts that can be findable. So as soon as we remove all of the parts, Jeff no longer makes any sense. We don't have any even consciousness, any kind of basis of designation that makes any sense for the designated object Jeff. Nothing makes sense anymore. So now this Jeff I thought was inherently existent is getting rocked and shaken. You can start to feel a sense of a non-finding is an uncomfortable thing. But always know that that non-finding isn't not finding Jeff. You lose Jeff, but you weren't, because you're not zeroing in on anything that would ever find a Jeff or a car or a house. You're only looking for an inherent existence. And the non-finding of that inherent existence is exactly the non-affirming negative that is the realization of the ultimate analysis. So it's amazing that we have this medicine that we can use to start to undo the way that we think, to see, or not undo it. See if the way that we think makes sense. See that if we can come up with the conclusion that the way that the things naturally appear to us tallies with reality when we subject them to analysis. And of course, we know this is all conceptual, but conceptuality is mistaken in the sense that it's going through a generic image instead of seeing something directly. So it's superimposing an image that isn't the thing that you're actually thinking that it is. But that generic image can be correct. The things are empty of inherent existence that you can conclude within meditation through inference, and we'll have a generic image that's the correct image, that's the same emptiness that will be realized when you have the direct perception. And when you come out of the direct perception of emptiness, it'll be a generic image of the emptiness again that's hanging around when you're back in your conceptual mind until you hop over it and see emptiness again directly. So now we've not found this thing we're looking for. So the entailment of emptiness is that if there is no intrinsically existent Jeff found within his parts or separate from his parts, this basically means that there's no inherently existent Jeff. Jeff is necessarily not inherently existent, because if Jeff was inherently existent, this inherent existence would be findable. And the non-finding of inherent existence is the non-affirming negative, which is the conclusion, which is the ultimate truth. That things are mere. So when you come out of this experience, supposedly, I've not had it, then you have to say that things exist around you, though. Even though you just subjected things to an ultimate analysis to see if they exist from their own side, things still exist when you go back to conventional truth, when you come back to the veiled consciousness that then once again veils the ultimate truth. So when you go back to that, you have to be able to say, well, then how are things operating? How is cause and effect operating? How is karma operating? How is Jeff talking? Jeff is talking right now. There's not, we all can concur that that's a truth that we can experience right now without having to investigate anything. So how could that experience be happening if we just had the opposite thing happen in terms of a non-finding, it seems? So we thought things objectively existed. Now we're back to conceptual, back to conventional truth, and we're saying, okay, well, if things don't objectively exist from their own side, if they're not established by way of their own character, if they aren't intrinsically existent, inherently existent, then there must be a mode of existence other than intrinsic existence. And that mode of existence is subjective existence. So this is how we start to undo how things exist, but don't inherently exist. Because you have to first say, do things exist? Yes. Buddha never said things don't exist. Buddha never said the self doesn't exist. Now, the self doesn't exist in the mode of existence that we think that it does, but there's certainly an imputed existence. There's an imputed existent self that's merely imputed in dependence upon a collection of among the 4 or 5 aggregates that serves as its basis of designation. There's an imputed existence that occurs and that is true. There's subjective existence that is true. And why do we have to say that things exist subjectively? Because we've already subjected them to ultimate analysis and seen that they don't exist from the object's own side. So there has to be another mode of existence if things exist than inherent existence. And this is the undoing that will take lifetimes to undo, but we start with the raw facts. We start with the true data. We start with the understandings of the actual object of negation. When we learn about dependent origination, we learn about the levels of dependent origination of causes and conditions. That's not enough to get you to understand emptiness, that dependent origination, the dependent origination of wholes being dependent upon parts. That alone isn't going to be able to get you to see emptiness directly. What's going to be required is seeing that those wholes and parts and those causes and conditions are bases of designation that are merely just imputed as this or that and have no intrinsic existence from the side of the basis of designation as the designated object. Wow. So this is what the Heart Sutra is talking about, and I hope I didn't talk too much or, like use too much technical terminology, but I know that everybody can learn this if you try. And I encourage all of you to really just give it a shot and give it a chance and give a little bit of systematic studies a chance. Study a little bit of low rig, mind and its functions, and the 7 minds, and study just a little bit about the tenet systems and start to get a love for this staircase of emptiness where you can see that first you understand that things are not permanent. You have the selflessness or emptiness of permanent, unitary, independent self. You have the emptiness then of the autonomous, substantial existence. Then you have the emptiness of externality. Then you have the emptiness of true existence without negating inherent existence. Then you have the emptiness of inherent existence. And you'll find this all within the beautiful tenet systems. And I encourage you all to take that staircase to negate those things within your own mind you don't even know are there, that need to be negated and need to have those rocks moved out of the way, as we talked about last week, to be able to get your minds calmer and to be able to get to the point where you can have a yogic direct perception of the emptiness of the object of negation. And the object of negation is inherent existence. And the Buddha says that all the five skandhas are empty of nature. And when we look at impermanent phenomena, we can see that we can put these things that we experience in our world, mountains and so forth, under skandhas. So it's just important for us to, when we look at all phenomena, they all fit into the 18 constituents. And we'll see them all kind of shown within this sutra to be lacking inherent existence. Not lacking existence, lacking inherent existence. So there's nothing in the universe that we can find when we subject it to ultimate analysis to have inherent existence. We will find it's merely designated in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation of some sort. It's imputed independence upon temporal moments and dependence upon directions and so forth. So depending upon the kind of phenomena that we're imputing, we can take any permanent or impermanent phenomena and see how it's merely designated. And that mere designation is enough for Nagarjuna to say that things exist conventionally, and for Chandrakirti to establish, and Lama Tsongkhapa to be so kind in illuminating the thought in the Lamrim Chemo and so forth, to establish what the object of negation is beyond the shadow of a doubt, and show the subtleties within object of negation that perhaps some of the other scholars weren't able to necessarily conclude. And we know that the tenets mean, when we look at a better translation, it's established conclusions. And we all have varying karmas and aptitudes, and in our certain lives, we have other aptitudes than and more aptitudes than others. And our established conclusions in this life may only reach a certain level. But if we start at a place that's beyond where we could have an established conclusion, we won't, first of all, have any kind of foundation to get to it, and we'll have started from a place where we don't have the aptitude to really meet the truth that the Buddha came to present. The Buddha, out of compassion, taught the varying tenet systems. It says the Buddha, out of compassion, taught the mind-only school view. The Buddha, out of compassion, taught these varying systems to start beings from the worldly view where they are at, to kind of move one's way to a place where not only is the self not operating person not operating the way that it seems to be, but everything around us isn't. And that maybe was too groundbreaking or shocking at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths and taught that the Four Noble Truths exist truly. So he needed to not shock the world, I guess, until the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha said, by the way, nothing exists truly, but everything that can be established by valid cognition exists. And within this hidden, we find the five paths: the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. The bodhisattva paths that one has to go through, those ripening paths and liberating paths that one traverses in order to become a Buddha, for the sake of all sentient beings. So in order to get rid of the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, which bind us to cyclic existence in a place where we're not omniscience. We're not omniscient. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind conscious dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Kala jabe ne jo damba ne ngje de jo ngai de do jen ju ba ba lama yi bu shen zi ne sung gan jo so la ja ze lo aga sama de ja jan da ra sama ra be ga sama de aga samara ja jan da ra sama ra ya be de ya da on ga de para sang ga de ba di zo a ba ba gon jo son ji ga ye de me do ji she lo ba do ji me ba do ji she wa do ji ja gi ba ji me de be je dan ji je den go ye zo ha Kirin ja ja ji shi shi wa dan mi dun wei jun dan zhu wa dan dong ba jun jin bong zong zong zhou ji da shi de zhang den da de le zhou. Mandala offering. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas, I wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds and knowledge of love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I accumulate by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I accumulate by teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. And that was from the great master Sachen Konga Nimpo, who got that teaching from Manjushri, parting from the four attachments when he was a little boy. If we could all only be so lucky to have visions and be able to receive teachings right from the Buddha of wisdom. I'd be so fortunate, right? So welcome. So glad to see all of you. And let's get right into the teaching tonight. But first, let's read the source of all my good, because we're looking at this text, and then we'll go right to where we left off last week, establishing that all sentient beings are our mother. So again, keeping in mind the source of all my good has four categories, or foundation of all good qualities. It's translated as many times, has four categories. First, how to find a teacher, how to, serve a teacher, how to act around a teacher, this kind of first category of establishing that the foundation of all excellence is the teacher. And then the next category, Pabonka Rinpoche says in his commentary, is that dealing with what you do once you've found a teacher. And then that deals with the next 11 stanzas. So the first stanza is how to, how to find a teacher and the relationship with the teacher. And then the next stanzas is what 11 stanzas deal with what you do once you've found a teacher. And we find the teachings for beings of three capacities contained within that body of work. And then a prayer that you have all obstacles removed, and that you'll always in this life be able to, not be separated from your spiritual friends, meaning those companions and so forth, as well as spiritual friends that are your teachers. A prayer that they live long and fruitful lives, and then any kind of obstacles stop. And then a final prayer, which is category 4, a final supplication that in all of our lives, we never are separated from perfect lamas, and we progress through all the stages to become Vajradhara ourselves, reach that state of perfection of Vajradhara ourselves. So there's those 4 categories, and it's funny how the final category leads you back in terms of the meaning to the first category that you must realize. You must realize the foundation of all good qualities is the Lama. If you, at the end of all of this, want to make supplications, that you never, ever, ever don't have one. The source of all my good. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Bless me to first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do. Try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teaching. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I am not well trained in the 3 moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together, one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that once I practice well the path shared and become a vessel that is worthy, I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then to keep them all even at the cost of my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now and stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path, and reach then quickly the place where I become myself, the one who holds the diamond. So wonderful to be here with all of you to talk to you about this. And we're in the section on the great scope in this poem. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. So we've been talking about equanimity, and then we've been talking about, which is the pre-step to the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, passed down from Lord Buddha to Lord Maitreya, and then down to Arya Sangha, and then through the lineages and to us. And we're so lucky to have this, aren't we? So we've been talking about that. And last week we talked about, the necessity of establishing previous lives, and how we aren't going to be able to really get any further with these meditations if we don't establish for this particular one previous lives. And I think that you'll concur that we really need to have really worked on this beforehand. Because if we have, for instance, the, small scope, the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, we're already establishing that virtue and non-virtue causes suffering and happiness and suffering respectively. So we're already establishing karma and future lives, and we're already establishing this kind of continuum. And in the medium scope, of course, we're establishing this pervasive compounded suffering. When we look at the main suffering that the Buddha meant in the First Noble Truth, when we're looking at that, of course, we're talking about being thrust over and over again, be out of control because of contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their active seeds, driven by self-grasping ignorance again and again into these bodies, contaminated bodies. We're expected by the time we get to the great scope to have realized these things. But most of us, if you're like myself, aren't realized by the time we get here. We're trying to familiarize our minds with these stages and then working on heavily where we're really at, which for me is in the lane a lot of the kind of small scope and the medium scope, kind of really trying to get the effort in my mind of death and impermanence, really working hard on that. But I also work hard at trying to change my mind with the kind of practices of the great scope. And it's so wonderful that we can integrate all of these things and kind of speed up our progress by knowing where we really are at and not deceiving ourselves, but also working on our minds in such a way that can help them ripen. So where did we land last week? So we looked at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, hey, you've really got to establish this kind of point of that the Buddha makes, that Lord Asanga points out in the levels of yogic deeds, where he says that I cannot see a place where you have not taken birth, lived, and died. When looking into the distance past, it's difficult for me to see the person who has not been your father, mother, brother, sister, instructor, preceptor, spiritual master, or teacher. So we looked at that quote from Asanga, and Lama Tsongkhapa points this out and uses this as kind of a guideline and as a reference to see this. And then we looked into the descent into the Lanka Sutra and found, if it's not the exact point, a very, very similar point that Lord Buddha makes in the Lankavatara Sutra. So we traced it back to Buddha, and then we also traced it back to, through looking at Asanga's text. So we see the Buddha, we see the Nalanda master, Arya Asanga, and then, we see Tsongkhapa, then presenting it. And then we looked at, that kind of way of looking about it, through the Lankavatara Sutra. And then we looked at the third Dalai Lama's Essence of Refined Gold, and the points made about it, recognizing all sentient beings are your mother, are your kin. And then His Holiness's commentary saying that you can use any being that you consider kin, any being you consider the most loving being to be the object of this meditation. And then we moved on to look at Pabonka Rinpoche's text, where we started to see that Pabonka says that we really must establish previous lives. I know we've already done so, and we're already so great because we're really high practitioners, but just in case we're not, Pabonka Rinpoche says you've really got to start with this argument about previous lives. So I want to read, kind of go back to what we read last week, because I find it of utmost importance. There's a quote from Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika Karika, which is quoted in Pabonka Rinpoche's book and quoted in Panchen Losang Yeshe's text to really show us how we establish this previous lives. That whenever a being takes birth, his or her breath, faculties, and mind do not arise solely from the physical body, independent of entities that are of the same kind. So that we know that when something doesn't arise in terms of its substantial cause being from a dissimilar class. So we'll learn more about that. When we look at rice seed rice sprout, we see that rice seed is the substantial cause for rice sprout. There's other cooperating conditions like sun and water and so forth, but the substantial cause that will directly give rise when it kind of ends to the sprout is the seed. So we see that the cause and effect don't have a simultaneous existence. There's a simultaneous disintegration of the seed and arisal of the sprout, but the substantial cause of that sprout was the seed itself. Likewise, when we look at the substantial cause of mind, it's the previous moment of mind. We look at the temporal moments of mind that are designated as the mind in each of those moments. And those temporal moments of mind are what cause the future moments of mind. The previous moment of mind or consciousness creates this moment of consciousness. So that being said, if that's the formula, this moment's consciousness creates a previous moment's consciousness that creates a previous moment's consciousness, then what up? Let's see. Here's the part of this argument which seeks to prove that a person's mind continuum has no beginning. Okay, so I just told you that this moment was caused by a previous moment, and Pabunka Rinpoche is saying you're not going to find a beginning. Let's see. So it says, today's mind is a continuum of yesterday's mind, and yesterday's mind is a continuum of the mind from the day before yesterday. This chain can be traced all the way back to the mind that existed at the moment of a person's conception in his mother's womb. But the mind at that moment of conception must be the continuation of a mind that existed just prior to the moment of conception, because we just said that this moment's mind was caused by a previous moment's mind, and you have to have the substantial cause for the result to be there. And when we look at what the substantial cause of consciousness is, it's not something from a dissimilar class. It's something that is a substantial class that is not that has the ability, that has a cause that's concordant with the arisal of that thing, which it is the substantial cause of. So the previous moment of mind is the substantial cause for the next moment of mind. So at the moment of conception, we have a moment of mind that we have to say came from a previous moment of mind. We can't say that it came from something physical, and we can't say that it came from something that's a dissimilar class, like a perfect mind, an omnipotent mind, a creator kind of mind. We would have to have the same qualities of that mind. We can't say that that mind came from our parents, because we would have to know what our parents know. We see cases where the child is smarter than the parent. We see cases where the parent is smarter than the child throughout their whole life. We know that the aptitude of the child and the parent isn't the same. We know that the consciousness isn't the same. We know that our consciousness isn't God's consciousness, isn't a perfect consciousness. We know that our consciousness merely came from a previous moment's consciousness, which is of this continuum of consciousness, our continuum that we designate the I independence upon. It's part of the collection that we're designating our I on, these moments of consciousness. It's wild when we think about what we're doing. So at the moment of conception, there's a mind there, and there must be a substantial cause. So what is it? It's a mind, a continuum that existed before the moment of conception in the womb. And since samsara has no beginning, there is no event we can point to and say, this is when my mind first came into being. It's illogical. Because the mind has no beginning, it can be established that our births have no beginning. This allows us to establish that each of us has taken birth countless times and that our former lives are without limit. Just as we had a mother in this life, we also had a mother in each of these previous lives that was either a womb birth or a birth from an egg. And just as we had one mother for each of those lives, we had 100 mothers when we took birth that way 100 times, and 1,000 mothers when we took birth that way 1,000 times. Therefore, since we have had an infinite number of mothers, it's impossible that all sentient beings have not been our mothers. Now, you might find yourself thinking, I agree that I must have had many different mothers, but it can't be true that all sentient beings have been my mother, because the number of sentient beings is infinite. So there are a number of sentient beings. When you see countless sentient beings, it means it's a number that we can't even come up with in our mind. But the Buddha can count sentient beings. Now you might find yourself thinking this. However, it isn't just in a general sense that our rebirths represent such a large number. We have taken birth as each of the countless species of sentient beings that there are, including all the wild animals such as deer and mountain goats, as well as all the various kinds of worms, insects, and the like. In addition, we have taken birth countless times as each of these countless species. Therefore, the number of births we have taken is much greater than the number of sentient beings that there are. And since we have had the same number of mothers as we have had since must have had the same number of mothers if we have had births, not only have all sentient beings been our mothers, we would not have been able to find enough mothers unless each of them had been our mothers a great many times. Now here we find from Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, a quote. If we tried to count our maternal lineage with pellets of soil the size of juniper berries, the earth wouldn't be enough. So if we were to sit down on the earth, and there's two ways to interpret this. This will come up, the ways to interpret it. But what it's saying is if we sat on the earth and started taking pieces of earth out of the earth, the size of a juniper berry, small, like this big, we started doing that, we would run out of earth and we still wouldn't have counted the number of mothers that we've had. So think about the earth and think about taking juniper-sized pieces of the earth you're sitting on out and going 1 and going 2 and going 3. So let's see what that's referring to. I just wanted you to get the analogy. You're sitting on the earth and you're picking at the earth little pieces of clod of dirt the size of a juniper berry, and you're going 1, you're going 2, and now you have no more earth left and you haven't even counted all of these mothers. So it says these lines refer explicitly to the lineage of your mother's mother, the mother of her mother, and so on. So we see Sakya Randhawa's commentary on Nagarjuna's text. It's not in this book, but I remember seeing it, says that, hey, a lot of people say this wrong. The reason is there's an oral tradition that interprets it a little differently because the oral tradition works with our mind any means necessary. However, so it's talking in this case, so technically this is saying the maternal lineage, your mother's mothers, 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 mothers. So that gets you the point. Your mother's mothers, mothers. You're taking the clods of dirt and you're not even having enough dirt in the whole earth to come up with that number. But the oral tradition says that you can look at it another way. And this is according to lineage gurus. We could modify this idea and take it to mean the lineage of your mother in this life, your mother in the life just before this one, your mother in the life just before that one, and so on and so on. Thus, if we had pellets of the earth the size of juniper berries to represent each of these mothers, we would use up all the earth's soil before we had counted 1/100th or even 1/1000th of all of our mothers. Therefore, unless each and every sentient being has been our mother, there would not be enough sentient beings to account for all of these mothers. It's amazing when we think of the vastness of what we're really talking about. We're not talking about something small at all. We're talking about a huge concept that we're trying to establish in our minds so that we discriminate every single sentient being that we come in contact with in a different way. So we come in contact with them and say, Mama, and we say, I would do anything for you. And I would put my needs before your needs before my own. It's a real transition from where my mind is at now to a place where I could discriminate all sentient beings in such a different way. Moreover, since all sentient beings, we'll read about 2 or 3 more minutes and then we'll end. Moreover, since all sentient beings are certain to achieve Buddhahood, the time will come when there are no longer any unenlightened beings, but our own individual samsaras go back an infinite length of time into the past. So it must be true that the number of times we have taken birth in samsara is much greater than the number of sentient beings there are in the universe. Therefore, unless each and every sentient being has been our mother countless times, there would not be enough sentient beings to account for all our mothers. We should conclude then that not only have all sentient beings been our mothers, but that every sentient being has been our mother many times. So we're making this conclusion, and then we will be able to come to the conclusion that all sentient beings are our mothers when we conclude that this mind is, and this I is what is going from life to life to life. This I that is merely designated on independence upon some sort of basis of designation. It's just some sort of collection that's serving as something for this designated object I to be imputed on. And that's all that's going on. It's wild that it's the case, but it's all that's going on. And then it says, we should also reflect how there is no form of sentient being in which we have not taken birth, and how we have taken birth in each of these forms numberless times. For example, consider the way in which we have taken birth as a human being. There's no place on this continent where we can claim to not have been born as a human being. And if we looked at Asanga's levels of yogic deeds and the quote that he gives from the sutra, it says that there's no place we haven't been born. And it says we've been born everywhere countless times. Similarly, we have been born as human beings countless times in all the worlds that lie in the east, south, west, north, and all the corners of the universe. When we think about like these kind of beings or countries or others that we consider our enemies, we have to realize that we might have been those sympathizers in our previous lives of just horrible ideas. So we have to understand that we're all capable of this horrific behavior because we haven't gotten rid of self-grasping ignorance and our self-cherishing attitude. After reflecting in this way, we should reach to the following conclusion. Since I have taken birth so many more times than there are sentient beings, not only have all sentient beings been my mother, there isn't a single one who hasn't been my mother for human birth. Thus, it is certain that all sentient beings have been my mother. So it's saying that even in terms of a human birth, if after such a reflection you are unable to develop the understanding that all sentient beings are your mothers, then you should pursue the opposite line of thought. Think to yourself, is it possible that I've never had a mother? To this you will react, no, because I have direct knowledge of my mother in this life. Then you can infer that you must also have had a mother in the life before this one, and so on. Eventually, you can return to the arguments of before. So you're supposed to be arguing with yourself when these doubts come up so that you can establish a different way of thinking that will actually lead to ease instead of frustration and sadness. Our normal way of thinking leads to frustration and sadness. This way of thinking leads to ease. And it's so important that we combine this with our understanding of emptiness that I just talked about, and understanding that this practice of equanimity and all the sentient beings and ourselves are empty of inherent existence. So the real compassion that Chandrakirti talks about, the highest, the non-referential compassion that Chandrakirti talks about in the entrance to the middle way, and Lama Tsongkhapa in illuminating the intent, is this kind of thought that suffering sentient beings are empty of inherent existence. The three types of compassion: the first type of compassion, the compassion that observes sentient beings, seeing sentient beings as suffering. And then the next level is seeing impermanent sentient beings that are suffering. So it's not seeing like impermanence, it's just seeing impermanent sentient beings that are suffering. And then the next level, the highest level, is seeing empty, impermanent sentient beings that are suffering. So if you can somehow see that appearances and emptiness, appearances help you conclude that there's an emptiness of inherent existence, and that emptiness of inherent existence concludes dependent origination, then you're on the right track. So anyway, when you're doing your meditations, try to incorporate both the ripening paths and the wisdom paths, and see if you can, because when we look at deity yoga, for instance, we're thinking of the deity and we're thinking of the emptiness of the deity, and we're trying to combine this in kind of one entity of thought, of method and wisdom uniting into our practice, the method of deity yoga and the wisdom of the emptiness of the deity. So with that being said, I hope that we can all evolve our minds to get closer and closer to the point where we could actually do the kind of practices that I was just talking about. I can say them with words, but to do them, we really need to be bodhisattvas who understand emptiness. And we can, and that's the thing we have to understand, not sell ourselves short and say, that's nothing I could ever do. I'm not a Kempo, I'm not a Geshe. No, everyone has a mind that's in the nature of clear light and unsullied and has a proliferating Buddha nature, has good qualities that can mature, and they can mature because the mind is empty of inherent existence. Just like the Buddha's mind is empty of inherent existence, but the Buddha's pure mind is empty of inherent existence, and our dirty mind is empty of inherent existence. And all we have to do, because all composite things are impermanent, all contaminated things are in the nature of suffering, as the first two seals say, we just have to create the causes that aren't contaminated to create uncontaminated results. So concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, may they be purified by this Vajrasattva mantra. Om Benza Sato Samaya Manipalaya Benza Sato Sena Bajitadita Meva Vasudagaya Meva Vasubugaya Meva Anurakta Meva Sarvasiti Me Praja Savakama Sucha Me Kitam Shiyan Kuruhum Ha Bhagavan Savadata Gata Benza Mame Moga Benza Baba Mahasamaya Safa Ahum Ve. May we always be protected by Paul and Lama, and may we keep Sandra Fisk in all of our prayers, who passed away recently. Jorama 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 Junjo Kala Raja Morama Waja Daja Dunjo Rilu Rilu Hong Jo. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful. Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. A prayer for the supplication to Namgyal Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ahom, Om Ahom, Om Ahom. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. Teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood that sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, and wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everybody, for your patient listening. I appreciate all of you. I hope your mind gets to have as many virtuous imprints planted in it as possible this week, and that you take the time to study and take the time to meditate and practice, not only, the study, but also engage in some calm abiding practices, and learn what those are. Because if we don't calm our minds down enough to be able to get closer and closer to understanding the object of negation, calm our minds down enough to be able to behave, we won't really get anywhere on the path. So I encourage you take all the Buddha's medicine in the stages that it was given and really, really use the mirror of the Dharma to see what medicine you should be taking and what's working best for you. So I appreciate all of you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.